Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Meredith Burns. I'm the Executive Director of Art House Productions. We are a nonprofit performing and visual arts organization here in Jersey City. And we are very excited to host this event in partnership with Seton Hall University, Hudson County Community College, Paul Robeson Galleries at Express Newark, Rutgers University, Newark, and the Feminist Art Project, a program of the Rutgers Center for Women in the Arts and Humanities. And I just want to give a quick shout out to my colleague, Courtney Little, for organizing this event and taking all of your registrations. There she is. Thank you, Courtney. And to Brooke Duffy and Jean Brazili, who I'm about to pass it over to. And once again, thank you all for being here. You are literally helping change the course of history. So Jean, take it over.
Thank you so much, Meredith. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Art House, for being our fierce collaborators and organizers extraordinaire, especially Courtney. Before we begin our third annual, it's an annual thing now, started by my colleague Brooke Duffy here at Seton Hall University. So I'm so happy. This is our third annual Wiki-thon, and we're going to begin the wiki editing shortly, but I'd like to do a brief presentation on 3 women artists that are working in the realm of this year's theme for 2022 for Women's History Month, which is providing healing and promoting health. So with that in mind, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background. On their website for Women's History Month, the theme is both a tribute to caregivers and frontline workers during the pandemic, but also a recognition of the myriad of other ways that women of all cultures are providing hope and healing throughout history. So I thought I'd kind of be a little more abstract in the way that some of the artists are providing health and healing. And I also wanted to talk about just the act of archiving, because I work in an art gallery. I'm a gallery director here at Seton Hall University's Walsh Gallery, for those of you that don't know me. And I work very closely with the archives across the hall. And so wiki editing and Wikipedia is really a crowdsourced archive. And an archive is a really important place because they preserve historical records, they illuminate stories of people that had an impact on us both presently or historically. And these stories can be really powerful. But unfortunately, some archives really are not equal. And they're struggling to achieve equal representation in terms of women, certain cultural perspectives. And that's what today is about, correcting some of those omissions, those historical omissions that ignore women's experiences or women's contributions to culture. So what's really important about today is that we're looking at culture and looking at a wiki as a encapsulation of culture, but it's a crowdsourced immutable tool. It functions a little bit differently than a traditional archive, but this flexible tool is still an important document of culture, maybe more so because it's a more democratized access. I'm not saying that everybody has access to the internet equally, but there is more democratic access on the internet than there might be to attend or to frequent an archive and study a collection. So that's why today is important. Also, it's important to note some of these facts. Women make up 15 to 20% of editors on Wikipedia. These statistics are from 2019. They may have been updated, but this is what I have, just to be clear. So that means that 80% of the content is being generated by people that don't identify as women. And what does that mean? About how women are being represented, or about what subjects are being included. So this event is trying to make a more gender balanced community within the Wikimedia community. Also, it's important to note that articles about men exceed those about women by 4 to 1. So again, there's a big disparity there. So today's Wiki-thon really is a social action. It's a social justice issue. So with that in mind, I'd like to share some of these women artists that are working in some of the areas that I was just speaking towards. So let me share my screen. And I'm going to do a short, maybe 15-minute presentation on some women artists. Here we go. There's my screen sharing. I use so many tools, I forget which way they work. There we go. So these women I'm about to speak about are providing healing and promoting hope as per the theme. And this first artist, this is a show, just to go back. This is a show that appeared at the Walsh Gallery in 2015. It was called The River Depends on Its Tributaries. And I curated this in collaboration with Elena Simone of the Merton Simpson Gallery. And the theme was about how African-American culture and African culture really was at the root of a lot of American culture, but it looked specifically at the tradition of masking. And so we've done a lot of different shows on women's themes, and kind of interspersing my dialogue with images of some of these shows. But this first artist, Hao Feng, I worked with her on a recent show at the Morris Arts. It's going to be on view in just a few weeks through August, and it's called Shifting Grounds. And I'm looking at some of the profound changes that happened during the pandemic. So Hao Feng is looking at the emotional well-being of people during the pandemic. And this piece, Your Ticket, is a digital print. And it really looked at, you know, this whole period of social distancing and lockdown. And on her website, she speaks about her art as a agent of transformation. And she calls her art, she discusses her art as a gift. And so I see this ticket or this piece of art as a gift, as offering people grace to be able to stay home and do nothing, and, you know, really give themselves the space to be home and maybe capitalize on this period of isolation rather than fighting it. There were some good things that came out of it. And this gift she discusses is taken from a Lewis Hyde book called The Gift. And here's a quote that she references on her website, as well as her artist statement. When art acts as an agent of transformation, then we may view it as a gift. And so the book really talks about the alternative economy of artistic practice and how working artists don't really fit well into the market economy, because they're really about spiritual uplift rather than necessarily commodifying art. The market commodifies the art, but not necessarily the artist. So what is the motivation if it's not money for someone like Hao, an artist of her ilk? So her art is a social practice that addresses human or nature's needs, not market forces. And this need for, you know, connection that we did not get during this period of lockdown. Her next piece, it's called Now O'Clock. And Now O'Clock is interesting because this piece is a kinetic piece, and the clock actually, the second hand inches forward, but then falls backward again. So it's never, time is stuck in one spot, never moving forward. The hour hand doesn't change, minute hand doesn't change, and yet the clock continues to tick, even though time doesn't change. And again, she's referencing that indeterminate space of lockdown during the pandemic, where we had nowhere to go and no schedule, and time either seemed really compressed or really attenuated. And the sound, there is a sound component of this piece, so the sound doesn't resonate with the lack of movement in the hands. There's a disconnect there, sort of like that disconnect we experienced during the lockdown. So this piece is really laden with notions of being in the present moment and Buddhist practices of mindfulness, in addition to being about the pandemic. And this is where that notion of gift comes back into play. Maybe this timeless, placeless place really is a gift to focus on ourselves, maybe to learn something we've always wanted to learn, like a lot of people had done. They went back to school, or they learned a new trade, or they learned a new practice. And actually, I'll talk about something that Hal learned during this time. But really, if you could see this period of isolation and social distancing for the gift that it could be, it would be a lot less painful, the sacrifices we made staying at home. And so this next piece, My Moments of 2020, Staying at Home, number 3, is made out of clay and pasta. And it speaks also to the pandemic in terms of touch, lacking human touch. And you can look at the fingers reaching forward as if to try to connect or touch. And that was a special sense of loss we felt during this time. And the artist speaks directly towards that. But again, she speaks about market economy because it's made out of clay and pasta, and some of the supply chain issues that happened during this time. So a lot of people had to make do with what they had. And so she was making art not with traditional materials of clay or oil paint or canvas, traditional painting, things that traditionally we would imbue with lots of value in the art market. She's making things out of clay and pasta, things that were readily available at home. So again, it's also referencing, quotidian concerns and staying at home, while speaking to this need for touch and connection. So this notion of gift, I want to get back to this. And I spoke about something that Hal learned during the lockdown. She taught herself to juggle, and she made these little amulets or pouches and was using these to juggle. But they also serve like amulets or packages, little gifts. And the gift is about, giving something precious. And this is a metaphor for maybe the gift of time or the gift of connection, or a lot of people made connections over Zoom, or went back to telephoning or FaceTiming. So this is perhaps a giving of the self during this period. And the way this is handcrafted, you can see there are rough edges. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there are raw edges on this piece. And you can see it's sewn roughly by hand. Again, so bringing in this idea of, touch and humanity, something that's not constructed, in a factory. And this gift of fearlessness is that notion of bravery, trying something new, like Hao taught herself to juggle, and maybe not, worried about appearing foolish because, there's a lot of failure involved with juggling on your way to learning. And so maybe overcoming self-imposed limitations during this time. There's a whole beautiful series of overlapping conversations that Hao is having with her work. And it's really about giving yourself the mental space to value some of these quiet moments in your daily lives that may have gone overlooked before the pandemic, when we were just caught up in rushing from thing to thing to thing. And so focusing on the present can really be a gift in her mind. The next artist I wanted to speak about are really two. It's an artistic duo, and you may recognize this from a show called Rise that was on view at the Walsh Gallery. This piece in the distance is by an artist I spoke about last year, Hayoon J. Lee. This piece in the distance is the one by Nancy Saleme and Patricia Cazorla. And this piece is called Defense. Here's a close-up of it. This is another incarnation of it at a different gallery where they were able to include the chandelier. But you see this place setting is set against the backdrop of people working, and I'll show you a close-up. People, farm workers working in fields. They're picking, harvesting, hoeing, transporting, planting. And so this piece called Defense is really focusing on invisible labor that makes our food supply chain run. people working in fields, orchards, canneries, nurseries, packing plants, and even slaughterhouses. Much of the work in agriculture today is done by migrants or immigrant laborers, and yet they're often working under the table in unsanitary or unsafe conditions. And they're not being paid very much, very often without benefits, being paid maybe by the pounds instead of by the hour. So these people who are harvesting nature's bounty, they're providing us with healing nourishment, and yet to the detriment of their own health and well-being. And so Nancy and Patricia are really drawing attention to some of the unseen heroes. And during the pandemic, they really put themselves out on the line because they were considered essential workers and were being forced to work during the time where we all had the luxury of staying home, perhaps, or working remotely. And this piece was made before this period of remote working, but it shows, in retrospect, fast forward a few years, it shows even more the unfairness or the inequity of some of the people that are working to supply us with food. Some of the work is more hopeful. So Nancy Salame and Patricia Cazorla very often work with source communities, and this piece, Threading a Dream, was in collaboration with people in the community surrounding the Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And this public art mural was made with input from people in the community. They surveyed people and asked them to identify, a theme that would be appropriate for Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And they sourced images of the buildings from people in the community. And they made the artwork with people from the community. They have some wonderful pictures on their website where they're embedded with people making artwork about their community. And the artists are more about facilitating the making as opposed to being the source of the making. They're a conduit. And it's really empowering people and getting their input on a project so that they feel a sense of community pride. And that also is a sense of healing, bringing communities together, making relationships, and having a sense of that this library space or this mural is for them and by them and for the community rather than being dropped into the community. It's sort of an art therapy in a sense. And you'll see words like sagrado, which means sacred. This is a sacred act and a sacred space. And words like life in Spanish, vida, or dream or hope. They're directly speaking to the themes of, this year's Women's History Month. And this last project that I'd like to speak about is more local. This piece, Flying High for Equality, this is a detail. This was a site-specific installation in the Bronx at Joyce Kilmer Park. It's not far from Yankee Stadium and the Grand Concourse. And here is, I'm pulling out so you can see more about the park. It's kind of a nondescript park. It's a little devoid of character without these birds. It's very blacktop, and I don't see a whole bunch of people activating the park here. And that's what this piece was about. It was about activating the park, bringing people together. And it also democratizes not just the art making process, like in Sheboygan, Michigan, or Wisconsin, sorry, but it democratizes the use of the park, because once these birds are in place, they're activated by people here for whatever use they see fit. So maybe this little boy needed comfort. Maybe someone else needs a place to sit. Maybe someone else just needs a backdrop for conversation, or they just want something pretty to look at while they go by. So people are sourcing their own needs as they use these birds that are embedded in their community in any way they see fit. It's part of their community. And birds, by the way, have connotations of freedom, hope, so it all goes along with this notion of healing and democratizing the art process. And the birds, again, become catalysts for human interaction, that craving for, people to connect, which is so appropriate right now during this time of pandemic. And the last artist I want to speak about, I don't actually have any personal connection with her, Natalie Bravo Barbie. She's an Argentinian artist, but I do have a connection with the person that brought her to York College at CUNY, Margaret Rose Vendries, and she was featured in that show I mentioned earlier, A River Depends on Its Tributary. She was one of the participating artists, and she is on faculty of CUNY at York College. And she invited Natalie Bravo Barbie to do this piece called Femicide. And it's a really heavy subject, but I think that the artist is working towards healing. So this piece, Femicide Floral, it's an ongoing memorial to women that were murdered by men in her native Argentina. And at the time that she created this piece in 2019, and it is an ongoing piece, so there are components being added, which I'll discuss in a moment. When this was created, there were 327 femicides in 2019 in Argentina alone. So it points to the enormity of the problem. And the artist uses the word femicide specifically because that's very different. It breaks out the issue from homicides in general and showing that there are patterns and trends, and women tend to be more of the targets of violent acts than men do. And this is her way of drawing attention to it. So each flower represents an individual and is labeled with that person's name. So now think about this arrangement of 327 flowers, each one standing for a woman in this gallery. Here's a close-up. And so you can see each one is labeled with a different person's name on these individual tags. And these are rather large. They're slightly larger than the size of your hand. So this memorial begins not just by Barbie's or Bravo Barbie's acknowledgement that femicide is a huge issue, not just in her native Argentina, but elsewhere. It serves as a microcosm for larger patterns and trends. But she then begins researching every individual woman's story and gathering each of these flowers, which become an archive of each woman's life. So she gathers media stories and traces of each woman from social media like Facebook. And with an understanding of each woman's history, she then creates a unique flower using a cyanotype process and hand cutting each leaf or petal individually, and then individually constructing and fabricating each one of these. So it's a very laborious process, and she purposely spends a lot of time with each flower to honor each woman's individuality and their unique story that may have been lost as they became a statistic in a police report or in a newspaper article. And so these flowers are physical manifestations of each particular woman and drive home the enormity of this loss and the scale. And here's a close-up of one flower. She uses different flowers, which is a metaphor for femininity. She's capitalizing on that trope knowingly to draw attention to the fact that these are individuals. And so when this is a quote from the artist, when someone says 327, it's just a number that one may or may not be able to imagine. And so she builds each cyanotype flower as a representative of each woman. And when one stands in a room with all these flowers, the overwhelming number of them has an impact when a life, a person, a woman is associated with each. And she extends this Argentinian trend to the US. And she notes in the US, the media hasn't adopted the usage of the term femicide to describe gender-based crimes against women. But if they did, she thinks it would become apparent how problematic these societal issues are in individual communities. And that's what she's trying to draw attention to. So using her thoughts on the term femicide, it lends itself to the notion that a woman's perspective in Wikipedia might contribute to drawing attention to the large numbers of women killed in her native Argentina, but also connecting the dots elsewhere to see other patterns of behavior and other troubling trends maybe within our society. And so I leave you with this. Here's one more detail. So I leave you with this last thought by Maya Angelou. And in conclusion, through social actions such as this wiki, we can draw attention to gender-based issues while overcoming questions of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And we should take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the work that we're doing here today and hopefully beyond this particular platform. And what we're doing as real world impacts, and we're part of that change today. So your participation is very important. And it's also an offering of hope to kind of correct some of these things that need correcting, or drawing attention to things that need our attention through your Wikipedia training today and through your contributions to this open source tool. So thank you all for being here. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Brooke Duffy, who is a librarian at Seton Hall University. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Jean, for setting the context and the information about Wikipedia editing for today. I think that with your opening remarks, we're really framed to understand why we're meeting today and how we can begin to chip away at this issue in our small amount of time that we have. So one thing that I just wanted to connect with you all is the name of the Wikipedia Edit-a-Thon that we're working under today is Art+Feminism, or Art and Feminism. And that is an organization that is a bunch of different professors, librarians, other information workers who came together around the concept of the gender disparities that exist in Wikipedia editing. So I'd like to just share with you really quickly their website. And Jean put the, fantastic, Jean put the link in there in case you want to see it yourself, but let me just open up my screen to share. Okay, so you can go to the Wikipedia, the Art and Feminism website yourself and explore a little bit more, but it's that's the group that we're operating under today. They set up the kind of infrastructure for us to do this. They have tons and tons of training materials. They have a dashboard that we're going to be working with today to get started with editing. And I just wanted to bring you to their About page, because if you want to come back and take a look at this a little more closely, it really sets the stage for what we're talking about today. So every year Wikimedia does a survey of kind of the demographics of who's editing on Wikipedia and other important issues like that. And in 2011, they found that only 10% of the contributors identified as female. So I can also share with you too the 2021 data for that, but it's not that much different. I mean, there's started to be a little bit of a dent in that, but it's still definitely an issue. And from what I understand, events like this one have been really helpful for expanding the access to Wikipedia editing training for people who are women or non-binary or trans, people who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. But one of the problems now is kind of retaining some of that. So events like this are great for mobilizing and getting people the basic skills to get started with Wikipedia editing, but sometimes it's difficult to keep that going. So joining up like we are today with a community and having other folks to talk to about this, to talk to about how to get started with editing is really important. And with that note, I would love to just take a second to introduce to you, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so we can come back, but I'd like to introduce to you Richard from Wikimedia New York. So Richard, do you want to take just a quick second to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Richard Nipel from Wikimedia New York City, user Pharos on the Wiki projects. Glad to be here today. Glad to help as much as I can with the Edit-a-Thon today. Yeah, hopefully people can get started, get their accounts, edit some articles on artists, maybe start some new articles, and things about exhibitions, things about the themes of the work. Something that I shared that we weren't able to do in previous years is focused on Wikidata. So you might want to edit some of the Wikidata items for artists and for artworks. So one of the nice things about the presentation about the artwork is that you can create. There's this project called Wiki Project Sum of All Paintings, where you want to get every painting and artwork that's in a public collection and put it on Wikidata and document it. So to say that this work represents, say, the theme of femicide, is response to femicide, that it uses these materials, that it was made in this year, that it and that it was worked on by these artists, inspired by these various things. So it's an interesting way you can query the different works of art, and that might be a nice exercise too, as well as just the normal Wikipedia editing, which we did today. And I'm glad to help people out individually. And also, I should mention, we're from your friendly local New York City chapter, New York City Wiki chapter. You're welcome to join our other events and stuff. We'll probably have a bunch of picnics over the next couple months. Anyway, thanks.
That's fantastic. I think we could all use some more picnics in our lives after the past couple years. So, okay, yeah, and when we end today, I want to make sure that if you're interested in continuing editing, that you can connect with these different organizations like the Wikimedia New York group, or like the Art and Feminism. They have a Slack channel that has a lot of training videos and resources. You can ask questions of other editors from the Art and Feminism project. So for today, our objectives are, we're not going to try to bite off too much, because sometimes in years past, we only have an hour here. So, from my perspective, if everyone can just, if you want to create a Wikipedia login and get connected with our dashboard, and maybe start to make a couple small changes to some articles, like linking up some orphan articles with other articles. We'll talk more about that in a second. Adding links and citations to articles. These are small actionable things that we can do to make change today. And that will give you a feel for what you can do going forward. So I want to introduce you to, let me get the link for you all. I'm going to put this in the chat. This is our little training guides that we created at Seton Hall University, and I'll also share screen on that. But I want you to have that so that you can get started with that. So this is our Art and Feminism Wikipedia editing kind of training guide that we created last year, and we're kind of adding on to. There's a little more context for you to dive into later if you'd like, about what is art and feminism, and why is this an issue? What are the issues of gender bias on Wikipedia? There's actually a Wikipedia page on that you can read, which is cool. And there's a page here for everyone to get started, which is like our editing 101. So I'm just gonna give a little primer of what we're gonna do, and then we'll take a few minutes for folks to kind of get started and try out some of these tasks. So we have an event dashboard for this event, which I will show you in a second. I'm going to put this link in the chat, which is just a link to all of the dashboards. So let me get back to the chat. Okay. So if everyone in a few minutes wants to go to this link, you'll be able to either log in if you are with us from a previous Wikipedia Edit-a-Thon, or if you are a Wikipedia editor already, you can log in, or you can sign up with Wikipedia. So one thing to note if you're going to sign up is that you want to make sure that your username is not like a common username that you use. Like, it's not something that's going to be easily traced back to you, because you want to have some anonymity on Wikipedia, because unfortunately there can be some examples of harassment that can come in Wikipedia editing at times. So you want to make sure that it's something that you don't use everywhere. Just kind of keep that in mind. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a minute to create your Wikipedia account and or get logged in. And after that, we're going to come back and just talk really briefly about some Wikipedia basics, like the core content policies for editing and just the anatomy of a Wikipedia page. So I put into the chat the link to get you started. That's the outreach dashboard link. So if everyone wants to just take a second to go there and either get logged in or to create a Wikipedia account. So we'll take maybe like 5 minutes for that. So like 11:50-ish, we'll come back. And questions, great too. I can take questions, or we can answer questions if they're not for me as well. So Anne, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. So I came here because my Wikipedia page is incorrect. Somebody must have done it. And so I want to work with somebody on my page, but I think it's not legal for me to work on my own, to do my own page.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you made it here today. And I see, Richard, you are messaging for the link to that?
Yeah, just the link to the dashboard page. I think
Okay, yeah.
Dashboard, yeah.
Sure, I'll get that for you in a second. And did I cut you off?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would like to find somebody to work with.
So I think it would be a great thing to connect with people today. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the core content policies, which are, as you're hinting, are going to tie in with the editing of the pages. Like, we don't edit from like our own pages, as you've already said. So we're going to go through that, and maybe at the end of today, you'll be able to find someone to connect with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. And let me know if there's other questions while you're getting logged in or creating an account.
Yeah, I think I just shared the dashboard link that you shared, just so people can find the proper place to log in.
Thank you. So if you already have a Wikipedia account, feel free to head on over to this link, which is the link Richard just shared, which is our dashboard for today. And this is where we will be working from to do our edits.
When I tried to join as an editor, it says that it needs a passcode. Is there a passcode to join?
Yes, there is. Let's see. Just saw it this morning. It was on this page. Sorry about that, Courtney. I'm gonna work on figuring that out. Oh, I have to log in, that's why. Okay, I'm going to put the passcode in the chat.
Did you put it in, Brooke?
Whoops, I think I messaged it just to Richard. So this is the passcode to join our dashboard. So I think everyone has that now? And I'm just going to take a poll. How many people need assistance either creating an account or getting logged in to the dashboard? You can just raise a hand if you need assistance. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. So we'll get started with the next step. So this is our dashboard, and this is just a place I can see where our editors are joining in here, which is great. So this is a place where we can we're logged into this today. So when we do our edits for this little window of time that we're working, it's already started. I opened the window yesterday. It's going to go through March 12th. So working on your edits through this window will allow us to be connected to the Art and Feminism portal today, and it it shows the Art and Feminism team that we're working on this project. And so you'll see that there's kind of like a culture of it's the communal culture of editing, and so other folks who are in our project can help you know, kind of shepherd in our edits if they're connected to the dashboard, because sometimes there's an issue with new editors that changes won't be accepted. So this will just help us with that. And Richard, if I'm ever not explaining something properly, feel free to just tag in too. Okay. All right. So I'm going to bring us back to our. This is in the chat again. That's if you go a few up. It's our link for the little guide. So this is the Seton Hall. This is the Seton Hall guide that we're working off of today. So today or any other times that you want to come and work, this is just a few kind of editing 101 tips that we've collected to help get you started. So we've already done check. We've made our Wikipedia account or signed in. Step 3 is just to get started understanding some of Wikipedia's core content policies. So just as Anne kind of mentioned to us earlier, there are kind of some rules in Wikipedia editing, and we'll talk a little bit about how some of these policies are sometimes they can be a little bit controversial, but they are kind of the tenets of Wikipedia editing that it's important to understand before we get started. So neutrality is one of the core content policies. So everything should be written from a neutral point of view. So you're not going to be adding in personal opinion. You're trying to, as much as it's possible, to write not from a place of bias. And so that, of course, is something that we're talking about today. There is gender bias on Wikipedia, but we're trying to expand the group of editors to create a less biased kind of landscape. So We also want to maintain the verifiability. So this is something that's interesting as a librarian, because a lot of times, if there's any students here today, a lot of times you'll have a professor say, you can't use Wikipedia, it's not a verifiable source. And that is true. I'm not going to tell students that they should use a Wikipedia page cited in their paper. But the interesting thing is that everything on Wikipedia should be, every little fact that's in an article really needs to have a citation linked to it from another source. So a lot of times with students, I will actually say, hey, check out the Wikipedia page for your topic, and then check out the reference list at the bottom, check out the citations, because those sources may actually be great sources to include in your paper. Also, as this is the part that connects to what Anne was saying, the original research and the conflict of interest parts here. So Wikipedia is really supposed to be, I would say, more of like a tertiary rather than a secondary source. It's not a place, it's not a primary source. It's not a place to come and publish original thought or original research. So you're trying to, in your Wikipedia editing, cite from reliable secondary sources in the claims that you're making. You can also link to archives as well, which would be primary sources. But you're not going to Wikipedia to create an original work or original thought. This also goes to the conflict of interest policy, which is that you really want to not be creating or editing an article either for yourself or from someone that you have a relationship with. So you wouldn't want to say, if your partner is an artist, you wouldn't want to necessarily be the one to create the Wikipedia page for them. And as you'll see here, these pages, if there is a conflict of interest, those pages are at risk of being deleted. So just kind of keep that in mind. But it's great to connect kind of with an event like today to find some kind of neutral folks and say, hey, my page needs some work, just as Anne has done. There's something on it that's incorrect, but like let's work on this together. So this reliable sources kind of goes back into the verifiability, but it's also interesting to point out that Art and Feminism has like a little kind of side project right now about defining reliable sources, because there's an inherent bias even in the types of reliable sources that are accepted in different cultures. There are different ways of knowledge, and so we should really their kind of thesis is we should really expand our cultural understanding of what reliable sources are. And this is another kind of controversial one, the notability issue. If the subject of an article doesn't have significant coverage by other sources, it's most likely considered not notable enough to have a Wikipedia page. And so this is something where it can be kind of dicey when we're talking about trying to expand the coverage for artists that have been traditionally excluded from some spaces. So, you know, this is something that we need to kind of take a close look at today. But when we go in to take a peek at some of the articles that I'm going to share with you in a minute, you can take a look at the different classes of articles and the different issues of notability that are going to be on some of these talk pages. And you can take a peek at what the treatment is of these articles on Wikipedia. So I'm going to just pause and see if there's any questions. Also, Richard, you had some great points in the chat. Do you want to just share those verbally in case?
Yeah, sure. If people
Okay.
if people aren't following the chat, you'll sometimes notice that there are 4 or 5 footnotes on Wikipedia. Sometimes we oversight because if it's a controversial issue or if it's something that's not well documented. It's important to note that Wikipedia's rules pages are editable, just like the articles themselves, and they could bear some evolution and improvement in terms of things like what are reliable sources in different domains, how should we deal with topics related to marginalized histories, what should be the notability requirements. Everything is a bit up for debate, and hopefully through the work of Art and Feminism and allied groups, we can help push Wikipedia further so that it's more open and more democratic and more inclusive of different communities. And that's part of what we're doing today, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So the last thing I want to share real quick before we take a break to go off and use your newfound powers of your new login to Wikipedia to see the behind the scenes stuff. I just want to explain really quickly about some of the basic anatomy of a Wikipedia page. So I always like to use this page for Bell Hooks, rest in power, who she just passed away in December. So I like to use the Wikipedia page for Bell Hooks because there's some really cool stuff that you can see on this page with your Wikipedia login that you wouldn't necessarily be able to see if you are not logged in. So the basic pieces that you now have are, you have the talk page, you have an edit portal, and you can also see the history of the edits. So I'll go with the view history real quick. This one is kind of a shorter thing, but this is just going to be, you're going to be able to see every single edit now that all of these different users have contributed to this page. So you're going to be able to see, there is a real sense of accountability in Wikipedia editing of, what has been done. So, being like correcting misspellings, capitalizing and uncapitalizing, adding in citations for things. We'll talk about how to add these notes, but this is just that sense of what has been done to this page. Your edit page here, you're going to see this will load in a second, but this is where you actually get like your little toolbar that you can start doing an edit on a particular page, where you can start adding in those footnotes, where you can start linking to other Wikipedia pages, which is, those are a couple tasks we can work on today. The read page is, the page that you get when you do a search on Wikipedia, or you do a Google search and it links to a Wikipedia page. The talk page is what I really want to highlight for you all, and then you can take a few minutes to look at some pages and take a peek at what's on the talk page and what's on the history pages for yourself. The reason I like to share this page in particular is there's a lot of interesting good stuff on the talk page. You can see a few things, like for example, you can see the notability, the class and notability of this particular subject. In this case, this is considered a vital article. This is considered a page that is pretty well established. There's been a fair amount of work done on this, and it's been established and connected as notable and important. So in the terms of Wikipedia. So you can also see too the different Wikipedia projects that the Bell Hooks page falls under, like the Wikipedia project Women in Red, or the Black Lives Matter project. So similar to Art and Feminism, these are other kind of Wikipedia campaigns, I should say, to get work done on particular pages and subjects. But this part is what I really want to show you, which is there is so much commentary behind the scenes on this particular page. And it's cool too, because I show this page every year, but it evolves every year. Like you could see like all of the conversation that is evolving on this particular page. And there's even like a little table of contents for different issues with this particular page. I always think that this part, the capitalization of her name, is an interesting comment here, because Bell Hooks that's a pseudonym. It's also the name of her great grandmother. She liked to write with her her name Bell and Hooks uncapitalized, so that's how she spelled her name. And so on this particular page, there's like all of these like kind of questions about how to grammatically represent her name using the different you know I guess how you'd say it, like editing kind of formats of Wikipedia. There's different rules for that as well. So it's cool. It's cool to be able to come here and see all of this. Richard, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I just mentioned that because of Bell Hooks and the way she spelled her name, it sort of forms an important part of Wikipedia sort of case law in terms of the names of articles, and we had to figure out how to, because actually the software didn't let us show say the B in Bell as not capitalized. We had to make a workaround for that, and eventually it was useful in defining people by their preferred names in all sorts of contexts, including LGBT issues. And so this is actually a pretty influential article in a lot of ways. Sometimes you see like these little these, like we call it, like case law, like you think of like the Supreme Court, of how you establish precedent, how the Wikipedia's rules in a larger sense change. Sometimes they change by activism on individual articles, individual points. Anyway, that's it.
Awesome. That's great context to have. So I figured we could just take a few minutes now and let you look behind the scenes a little bit. I'm going to give you a little, you can choose to use this activity if you would like, or if you have Wikipedia pages for artists or other individuals, or maybe art movements, or different types of issues, you can look up the Wikipedia pages for those. But I'm going to put this link back in. So this is the link to the activity that I'm mentioning here. And so you can use your login to come here and take a peek at some Wikipedia pages that I have linked here. So there are a few selected artists from the Women Artists Archives National Directory at Rutgers, and you can take a peek at their Wikipedia pages with your new login to see if there's anything interesting that you would notice there. If we have any students here from the MLK Scholars today, I know that you all are doing a project this semester on hidden figures. So I took a few activist writers from your list of hidden figures and linked their Wikipedia pages. So if you want to open up one of those and use that to, explore the different pieces of a Wikipedia article, you can do that as well. And again, if you have a page that you're interested in editing today or interested in exploring, feel free to use that instead. But just come in, explore the different talk, edit, view history pages, and then come back and feel free to mention either in the chat or verbally any things you noticed or any questions that you might have for the group here. So we'll come back at like 12 let's take until like 12:15 for this particular part, and feel free to share in the chat anything that you're noticing as you're going.
Can I talk?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I put in the chat that I would like to work with somebody to really expand my page. So I just wanted to verbally send that out to people. I don't know if people are looking at the chat. So is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that
today.
Anne?
Yeah, this is Anne.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd be really, really happy to do that. So, okay. Thank you so much.
And I just made a minor edit to your page. I wrote that the work was included and then censored, but I took out the part that your show was closed.
Yeah, this,
I know
so.
I know you want more, but I made that.
Oh, Jean, thank you so much, because people have contacted me about this, and yeah, anyway,
I'll hope the edit sticks. We'll see. I sourced.
we'll see. Yeah, so,
Good
but
luck.
as I said, I'd like to work one-on-one with somebody, not in this, yeah.
Yeah, all right. If I think of anybody though, I took your contact information. I'll
Okay, great. Yeah,
find that
thank
person.
you. And great.
One thing, Anne, that you might want to do is if there are like some major parts that are missing that you want to emphasize, maybe you could put it on the discussion page. So there's a talk page there. You could say,
Oh,
me, Anne, the subject
I
of the
think
article.
no, we're talking 75 years worth of,
Yeah.
being on the
Yeah.
planet. I think
Okay.
it's not so easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
Okay,
yeah,
well,
whoever
maybe-
wants to work with me, I would be so happy.
so
So
you can find the right connection. Yeah.
thank you so much. I won't take up any more time.
So Robin had a great question, and maybe this is something that Richard, you might be able to shed a little bit of light on this. So Robin, you're saying that you are a colleague of Linda Troller.
Yes, I am featured in one of Linda's photography books. So that I'm assuming that would completely prohibit me from making any modifications, correct? Because of conflict of interest?
I mean, I guess it depends. Like, I guess it might depend a bit on the nature. So I don't know if you have like, is it like if it's like a correction of fact, or it's something that should be added? Maybe you could add it to the talk page, and then someone else can put it in.
Oh, I see. So what you're suggesting is that if any of us have an actual connection that could mean a conflict of interest, then it's best to put it on the talk page and hope that someone else who's not affiliated then executes that correction.
Yeah, and you can, if you're doing it today, obviously you can let us know, because people don't always look at the talk pages, but today we could look at the talk pages.
Okay, and the other thing, and on the inverse of that, there was once a Wikipedia article about me that someone else wrote, but it was deleted, and that was in 2016. So it lives on Deletionpedia. So then what would be the process to potentially have that restored and updated? Reach out to somebody? I mean, there's no talk page because it's been deleted.
I'll look at it. Actually, I'll look at it this afternoon. Let me look at it.
Yeah, and this is so, I mean, this more than the other years, I think we're getting some really great community here, and we're getting folks who are like you, Robin. You're like, I have a Wikipedia page somewhere, but it got deleted. So I think this is a great place for us to make these connections where maybe we should just have like a continuing conversation, or maybe even like a continuing editing event where we can work on some of these issues.
Yes, you should.
I just wanted to also add something that I do frequently is when there are a lot of these catalog lists, like for instance, there's the list of performance artists. I personally found an article or a post of an event that featured a lot of Black performance artists. And then I cross-listed and checked to see if they were in that list. And so I added all of the ones that were not, that actually had a Wikipedia page. So I think that's another way of being an activist in the archive, is not just making sure that the page exists, but that it can be connected and found in the community of colleagues.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think that-
Robin, that's fantastic. And that's actually one of the things that I want us to work on today. So
Mhm.
I'm so happy that you said that and you've connected that to the experience that you have.
I just sent a screenshot of where there's like a whole list one over a couple of days. I was just making sure we're in there because the goal is for me to eventually be on that list.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so with that note, I wanna share another link with you all. So this is something else that connects directly to what Robin has been speaking to. This is a task page for us to work on today. So so a couple things. So linking a Wikipedia page to other Wikipedia pages. And the other piece was fixing pages with citation issues. These are things that we can do they're kind of easy to get started with, tasks that are great to practice with today. So that link that I just shared with you is going to bring you to this task page for us. I'm going to share with you the Art and Feminism task list, which is fantastic. There's also links to the Art and Feminism list of Orphan Articles and pages with citation issues that I'm going to share with you so that you can kind of see what we're talking about here. So this is the meetup page for the Art and Feminism tasks, which is fantastic. So they've already done so much legwork on kind of explaining to you some of these issues and some of these situations with, you know, the notability is something that we talked about earlier. But this is a really great place to link, to bookmark, to get yourself started with this campaign. So this is a list of orphan articles. So an orphan article is defined as an article with no links from that article to other pages. So Robin, is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, something similar to that. Or I wouldn't know if it doesn't have links to the other pages, but it's more the opposite. I knew that particular articles needed to be included in that particular list. Or maybe I'm actually answering your question. Yes, I'm not sure. I'm confusing myself.
Amazing. So but I figure we can take a peek at feel free to shout out if you see a person or an artist on this list that you'd like us to click into. Otherwise I'll just choose one at random. But if you see anything, okay. So I'm just going to choose Calliope amorphous.
I'm glad. I love that name.
That's why I chose it. I loved it. So so it looks like this page may not be like a truly orphan page. It looks like because it's been on this list, folks have come in and they have done some of the work to try to connect this to other pages. But what you're going to see is anytime that there is a blue link, this is linking out to another Wikipedia page. So even something as simple as, you know, this artist was born in Providence, Rhode Island. This is going to link you to, you know, the Wikipedia page for Providence, Rhode Island. But what you're talking about, Robin, with kind of connecting to other maybe performance artists or other artists that are connected. This is a good example here. Amorphous began working with glitch art in 2013. So if we click on glitch art, this is the Wikipedia page for glitch art, which is something that's new to me, which is really cool. I guess Nam June Paik, who I know, is an example of that, but that's cool. But yeah, so this is like this is one way that you can kind of, I don't know, Richard, if you call it this, but it's almost like creating like stability in a page, so that like it's like when a page is linked to a lot of other pages, then it has a better
it helps if it's part of the ecosystem, that it's, you know, it's it's playing with the other articles. It's, you know, they're doing things together, and it has, like, there's some context, so you can show, like, you know, an artist part of a movement? Is it an artist part of an events, things like that. So it's sort of, it helps give some context and show the reason why there should be such articles.
Yeah. I was also like, as I'm scrolling through here, you know, things even as simple as like photography, you know, that's like the word photography is getting linked out to the article on photography. But I'm thinking, like, I'm seeing a lot of mentions of self-portraits, and that could potentially be like a cool thing to link up to. So so if I go to the edit part of this page, because I was on the read page, now I'm on the edit part, but if I go to like self-portraits, for example, this is where I can go in, I can highlight it, I can click on link. This is something really easy that you all can practice right away. You can, it will look either on an external site, or the default is to Wikipedia, and it will bring up a list of potentially relevant Wikipedia articles. I can select self-portrait, the Wikipedia page for self-portrait, and I can go ahead and click to make that a link. So now I've just made that change so that it's linking out to the other page. So some of you may, you know, may already have examples of pages that you might want to do this type of work on, but also feel free to go to that orphan article list that you can, you know, make some changes right away. I'm going to also click back to, just going to click, oops, continue editing. I should just actually go into the link. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our task list here. So you can check out those links to orphan articles. You can also check out pages with citation issues. So this is again on the Art and Feminism task list, but these are pages that could potentially have one of or several of these issues here. So just in general, they might just need more citations in general. So again, that's going to help contribute to like the notability factor of the page. It could also be a biography of a living person that needs more citations, or it could be an article that relies too much on primary sources. So again, we're going to be wanting to try to connect these individuals to secondary sources, because that's really where you get that kind of, it falls into that like notability factor for Wikipedia. So I actually, the first one is really interesting to me, the May 1968 protests in France. So I'm going to just check out this one. Again, remember, you can always go into the talk pages and see what the conversation is. There's things that folks are, you know, having comments on, but if you go in and this one takes like a little, this isn't quite as quick and easy as the orphan article one. This one requires a little bit more kind of reading and synthesis. But if you happen to know one of these topics really well, and you know that there are maybe you can link to a book about you know, this movement, or maybe you can just fill in some of the facts for this. I'm not actually going to make an edit to this particular page, but I will show you how you would be able to do that. You can simply come to the end of a sentence here, and you can go up to the cite function up here. And if you have a website that is you could link to, you can just as easily as that, you just put in the link to the website to give that particular sentence a citation. You can also do it for other types of media that are not websites. So as I was mentioning before, maybe you know of a particular book that would be a citation for this particular sentence here. You could then click on book, and then you would add in the citation information for that particular book. And then you'd be able to insert that and create that change. So those two quick things, the orphan articles and the citation, adding a citation to an article, those are two very small but actionable things that we can do. So I figured we could take maybe like 15 minutes to kind of get your feet wet. You can start exploring some of those task lists. Maybe also start networking in the chat too, if you want to connect with other people and make this something that's an ongoing partnership. That would be fantastic. But definitely get in there and start exploring with different pages and with the toolbar on the edit page so that you can see some of these changes. So I'm going to stop sharing for a few minutes, but I'm going to be here monitoring the chat along with Richard and others that are here. So I figured we could take until 12, maybe 40 or so to try to do a little bit of exploring and editing. And again, feel free to share in the chat or verbally any questions that you have. Really quick, I just realized I forgot a little thing that would be important to mention. If you make, say, some changes to add some articles to a so-called orphan article, make sure at the end you click the little publish changes blue button that you have up in the top right-hand corner to make sure your changes go live. And I would consider, and Richard, you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would consider linking an article to another Wikipedia article to be a minor edit. So I would just check that off as this is a minor edit. But you can also get in the practice of just, describing what you changed, because remember that will go onto the history page of the article. So it's a record for other Wikipedia editors of what changes have been made to that particular page. Okay, so I want to check back in and see how everyone is doing. And I'll give you all a second to think about what you might want to share about what you've been working on. But while you're doing that, I figured I would show our dashboard, because this is the kind of cool thing about our dashboard is that you can see the total work that we've done today so far, which is kind of cool. You can see we've already done 38 edits. We've worked on 16 different articles. We've added some words. And so you can actually go in and you can take a peek at some of these changes. You can see what other folks have been working on. And it's cool. It's really cool to see everything that's been happening. So feel free to go back there and check that out. I also wanted to, as I said, give you the opportunity to share anything that you have been working on or maybe interesting issues that you have encountered in some of your work so far. So I will let you all chime in at this point. Richard, I saw you were working on the article for Seneca Village, which is super cool. Do you want to take a second to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on that a lot recently. We did actually, so there's an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art called the Before Yesterday We Could Fly, the Afrofuturist Period Room, and it's sort of a reconstructed view of Seneca. So Seneca Village was a mostly African American town that was in the land that was raised for Central Park, and the exhibit at the Met is like an exhibition about the history and like the potential like future and sort of alternate history of Seneca Village and the African American community of New York. And so I got really interested in the history of Seneca Village itself, and just the things that have been discovered recently. There've been several archaeological digs. It's another aspect of undercovered history that is hopefully being resurfaced, and that maybe we can be better represented in, like, say, monuments in the park and things like that. So really glad to work on that.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this now, because I didn't know about that exhibit at the Met, and I'm definitely going to have to check that out. So I just linked to that in the chat. So cool. I noticed like a couple small little things while I was editing. I was mostly working on orphan articles. But one thing that I thought was kind of interesting that came up, I was working on the Africa's Out page, which is one of the list of orphan articles. And in it, there was a mention of the Studio Museum in Harlem, but whoever had typed it out had said Studio Museum of Harlem. And so it wasn't coming up as a link because of that. So it's just a tiny little grammatical thing. So I just switched that and then linked it out to the Studio Museum Wikipedia article. But when I was in there, I, like you do on Wikipedia, you kind of go down rabbit holes and you start like reading and seeing different artists. And I came across a painter, Bob Thompson, who was part of the Harlem revival, and I started kind of like reading about his page, and then I'm like, oh, this is a page that might need some work. So it's kind of cool, like you start finding things to work on. And I don't know, just as a personal note, I was like, oh, this is oddly soothing. Like this is kind of like, it's like a nice just thing to do that feels like I'm doing something, I'm adding something to the landscape of the internet, but I'm also, it's just kind of like repetitive and calming too. So might be something that I do as a pastime. So does anyone else want to share any observations or what you were working on? Okay. Well, oh, Courtney, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was also doing orphan articles, which I feel like is all I do really on Wikipedia. That's as deep as I go. But I was also looking for some citations here and there, and just want to, point out that it's so hard to find press coverage or any other kind of news articles about so many small art installations, exhibits, performances. Like there just isn't a lot of coverage out there. So that just really made me think a lot about how we can expand what we can use as a legitimate citation, right? Like, can you use a Facebook post? Can you use some of these other ways that people are sharing information now that's not necessarily a New York Times article or something? So.
Wow, that's a great point.
Yeah, it's a great question. Just speaking to that from my perspective, I'm trying to also create content in the form of like reviews and articles in different outlets in order to create content that can be repurposed in places like Wikipedia, but also just in general to draw attention to the types of artists that deserve so much attention but don't necessarily get it for whatever reason. So that I use that also as like a social justice practice by illuminating art practices, putting it in writing, and then hoping that someone comes along and grabs that stuff and would populate a place like Wikipedia with that content.
I think that's a really good point to kind of transition to our closing on too, because I was reading some articles about the founders of the Art and Feminism project in preparing for the talk today, and one of them said really that I think they were mentioned as like movers and shakers, or it was like an influential kind of press coverage that the art and feminism movement got, and it was really, the point was really that when we add to information on Wikipedia, we're really helping to kind of change the shape of the internet by creating exposure for different artists, different individuals, different movements that, when you do a Google search, I say this to students all the time, like the first thing that you see oftentimes is a Wikipedia article. So thinking about that, thinking about everyone out there in the world looking for information, and the first thing that comes up is a Wikipedia article. So when we add to that, we're really helping to disseminate information about something. So even if we're just adding little citations or orphan article links, it's definitely a productive pastime, something that we can do. And I think by having this event every year now, sometimes my years get busy and I don't do very much editing in between, events, but even just having it as an annual thing makes us continuing this practice together. So with that, I will probably send out, maybe through Art House, I will be able to send out a quick little question or survey if you all would like to continue doing these types of events maybe throughout the year, maybe even on a more focused problem or issue, either creating a new page or really expanding a page that's a stub and is at risk of being deleted. So I will try to get that information to all of you. Also, I'm going to leave you on some information about how you can continue editing in the meantime. Wikipedia training page. So if you come back to this page, you can go to either the tasks to work on, which is continuing, of course, the advanced editing. This has a lot more trainings for you. Also, there's that Art and Feminism Slack channel I mentioned. So in order to get added to that, just send them an email and they will do that. There's also a short training video, which is really great for kind of getting started more in depth with editing. But there's also even a longer one, a full length one. So if you wanted to at any point start a new article, I put the little timestamp for you of what point in that video would show you how to do that. So there's a lot more that you can do to continue with this. And hopefully we will also continue to build our community here from year to year so that we can learn from artists such as yourselves about pages that need work, and pages that need to be linked up with other artists and art movements. I really, really appreciate the participation from all of you today with sharing what you've been working on, who you've been working with, what what your pages need work on. So please continue the conversation. As I mentioned, we'll find ways to connect after this going forward. And yeah, I'll just turn it back over to Richard, Jean, our friends at Art House, in case you have any closing remarks.
No, I think you said it all. It gets better and better every year. Thank you all for being a part of it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you, everyone.